Yeah, so tonight, what I'm going to talk about, I'm not necessarily going to talk about anything about actually how to do it. What I'm going to talk about is my journey, so you can understand how I got into this, how I got into making lures, the journey it's taken me on, and what I've learned as a fisherman, and how I think about fishing and how I fish myself. Okay, so that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about tonight. Hopefully, a lot of you can relate to that journey, and hopefully, it may help you catch the odd fish or two more, and also understand what goes in behind the Bonze brand itself. There's actually a person that's done a reasonable amount of fishing. Just to begin, like how I got started making lures for a start. I live in a little place at the top of the North Island in New Zealand, a place called the Bay of Islands. It's pretty much like the Kona of New Zealand for marlin fishing. If you live there, you're probably going to get a chance to go marlin fishing at some stage. The thing about New Zealand marlin fishing, it is very difficult. If you catch one every 3 days, you're an exceptional fisherman. So the fishing's very tough. So how it all got started, I got a chance to go fishing there when I was like 13, and there was a chef that I worked at a restaurant, and he's like, mate, you've got to come marlin fishing with me. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm that into it or not. Anyway, I'd always been like snapper fishing and that, and so he convinced me to go. I was seasick as anything. We caught nothing, and I was like, nah, man, this marlin fishing is not for me at all. Little did I know, it was November, and in New Zealand, I mean, I could count on one hand how many marlin I ever caught in November. It was rough, it was shitty. So anyway, he convinced me a month later, said, come on, let's go. So we went. We had probably one of the best days of marlin fishing I've ever seen in my life out of the Bay of Islands. We had like 6 bites, caught a couple, caught some yellowfins, and the guy that I went with, the actual owner of the boat, said he made these lures. And I was like, man, they're pretty cool. Like, I was blown away how fish would come and eat these lures, and I was like, oh, I'd really like to make one myself. So anyway, I went back to school the following year, and we had a tech class. And I told the teacher that, you know, I'd like to do this. He says, well, you can do that as your tech class for the year. So I made one. I knew nothing about it, like literally nothing. I made a lure. I convinced the guy to buy it. He caught a marlin on it the first day, and that was the humble beginnings of making a few lures. And then I started working on local charter boats there, going fishing more than I was going to school. And then I finished school, I got a skipper's ticket, I started running a charter boat at home, I caught a few marlin, thought I knew it all, and I decided, well, I need to learn some more. So I decided, well, if I'm going to really learn, I'm going to go to Kona, because that's the place that, if you're a lure fisherman for blue marlin, that's where I want to be, that's where I want to learn from, because that's obviously the home of lure fishing. It's the home of blue marlin fishing for lures, and I want to go and learn from the best lure makers, and I want to learn from the best captains that I could find at the time. So you've got to remember, this is, 1995, so 2000, so like 25 years ago. There was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was nothing, no social media at all. So I basically bought a ticket to Kona. I had a week's accommodation in a hotel. I had enough money on a credit card to last me that week. And I thought, well, if I can't get a job on a boat, I'm just going to come home, have a holiday for a week, and I'll come back to New Zealand. I'd literally never been on a plane before in my life. So it was a big deal for me to jump on this plane and go off to a place that I didn't know anyone. So I rocked across there, and the first morning I went down the marina. 5 o'clock in the morning I was down there. And I walk in the dock, and there was one boat with one captain on it. And I got talking to him, and he's like, oh, you know, where are you from? I was like, oh, New Zealand. And New Zealand's a little place when it comes to fishing. And he goes, oh, do you know such and such? And I'm like, oh man, are you serious? Like, his son's like one of my very good friends. So anyway, he's like, would you like to come fishing with me? And I said, yeah, too right, I'd love to go fishing with you. So anyway, he says, go get yourself a sandwich, jump on the boat, and we'll go. And anyway, I literally knew nothing about Kona fishery. This is my first day there. But I did think we were going to go and catch blue marlin with, 130-pound rods, some lures and that. But this boat was very different. And we went out with, he had a 50 wide on a stand-up rod full of braid and a spinning rod with 50-pound full of braid. And this is before the days of Stellas and Saltigas and all that kind of stuff that we know now for topwater fishing and all that kind of stuff. And there was an American client, big fellow with a beard, cigar, and I was thinking, well, we're going to go and catch GTs and stuff like that. But anyway, we went down off town, and if anybody's fished Kona, you fish very close to the shore there. So we went down off town and we caught a live bait, and we rigged it up on the spinning rod, and we ran out off to the edge to the drop off, and it was a full piano wire leader with straight braid, and we chucked the bait over the side, put it in the clip, and we started slow trolling. I still have no idea what we were trying to catch at this stage. I was still thinking, I don't know what, we're shark fishing here or something. This is how green I was. Anyway, we go along, and the skipper was not really the friendliest guy once I got to know him. He was not very chatty at all. And the charter was not that chatty either. But we'd been trolling for about maybe 3 hours, and bang, out of the clip, the bait came. And I was like, I don't know what's happening here. And literally they must have fished together so many times that none of them said anything. And the captain comes down and he drove the boat from downstairs. And we never came tight on whatever had eaten the bait. We just started going backwards. And we started going backwards. And I'd never been in a boat that went back as hard as this thing. And we still hadn't seen the fish, we hadn't come tight, and he's just like, get your gloves on. And I'm like, what the hell? Literally have no idea what's going on. We'd backed around in an arc for about 3 or 4 minutes. And literally the leader pops up and he goes, grab it, man, grab it. I grab it, out pops like a 500-pound blue marlin. This captain's going as hard as he can to drive this boat underneath that thing. And he's like, hold on to it. I held on to it. I busted off, land on my ass in the cockpit, and I'm going, holy shit, there's my career of like first day done. Anyway, he comes across and slaps me on the back and goes, how badass was that? And I was like, that was the first experience I ever had blue marlin fishing in Kona. I ended up working for that guy for 4 seasons. He's the most amazing captain and mentor I could ever meet in my life. It turns out that the charter was the owner of Accurate Reels. And what they were trying to do was break the reels. And the biggest, fastest fish they could think of was a blue marlin. So, as I said, this was way before all the days of what we know now with braided lines and all that kind of stuff. So I was very, very lucky to meet these people that were so far ahead of their time that put me instead to go further into the fishing. I know that was on a live bait, that one, but over the next 4 years, my captain was a guy called Mike Rand, had a boat called the Spellbound, and I was lucky enough to fish with some of the top, like I fished with Bart Miller, was one of his best mates. He used to come on the boat a bunch. So I'd sit there, and it's so interesting, you learn from all these guys. Amazing fishermen, but all Bart wants to talk about is how many chicks he bangs, you know? Like, it's so interesting, all the different people that you meet, and then the knowledge that you can gain just out of having a conversation with them like that. So that was my first sort of 4 or 5 years into lure making. I got to meet Gary Eoff, who makes Marlin Magic lures. I learned a bunch of things off him. I fished with Eric Rusnak, that makes Aloha lures, that ran the Sundowner when I was there. So yeah, I got a really good grounding in in Kona, and it holds a very special place in my heart, that place. But after those 4 years, I got an opportunity to, I had a Kiwi mate of mine, and he goes to me, he says, oh, I hear you've been doing some good things in Kona. He says, I've been fishing in a place called Cape Verde. You really need to go and check that place out. So he goes, I've got a mate that's got a boat there. Send him an email and see if you can go and crew for him, because you just need to go and see the place. I mean, at the time, I'd never heard of Cape Verde. I didn't even know where it was. But I looked it up. It said it had great blue marlin fishing. Anyway, I sent the guy a message, and he comes back to me, says, no, you can't come. I was like, okay, well, I'll just go back to Hawaii. But 3 weeks later, he sent me another message. He goes, how about you come and run my boat? I didn't read any further past that. I was like, yeah, where do I sign up? Like, I'm coming. So anyway, he told me that he had a nice 33 Bertram. It's caught a bunch of granders, and, you know, get across here, I've got you a full season to run the boat. So I started looking at trying to get there. I went through 3 travel agents to try to even get a ticket to get there. So just to tell you where Cape Verde is, if you look at the map of Africa, at the top you've got Morocco and the big elephant's ear, like at the top. Cape Verde is, I think, 900 miles off the end of there, and there's an archipelago of 9 islands there. So anyway, I set off on a journey. I did 7 flights in 63 hours all in one go. Never again. Anyway, I turn up there and we land, and we're going into land, and I look down and I'm like, it looks pretty windy here, man. Like, there's a lot of whitecaps. Anyway, we land, and it's just basically like blowing 30, 40 knots, and it's just a sandstorm, and it's just getting absolutely like torn apart. And I rock up, and there's this guy called Bruno, who owns the boats, owns a boat called the Happy Hooker. He's won the World Cup twice. I think he's caught 13 granders. And he's a German guy. Turns up, I don't know this guy, just a few emails. He's in a full linen white shirt, cut-off jeans, full dress clothes, massive gold chain, eagle tattooed on his chest. And he goes, hi, I'm Bruno. And I'm like, this guy's caught 13 granders and like won the World Cup twice. Anyway, he takes me down the boat, and we get to the marina, and the marina is white, just white with wind. Anyway, he goes, oh, we're doing a bit of work on the boat. I was like, okay. And you know when you walk down the marina and you see a boat and you go, thank God I'm not going on that one? Well, that was my boat. I was like, holy heck, check this thing out. It doesn't really look like the photos he sent me. Anyway, that boat didn't run for 10 days when we first got there, because they were changing it. Never had a Raycor filter. So they tried to put Raycor filters on it, but they could never get it to run once the Raycor, and it ran for like 10 minutes and then it would cut out. So anyway, he was like, Bonze, don't worry about it, mate. This boat's never let me down. Never let me down. And at this stage, I'm like, it's never let you down. It hasn't run for more than 10 minutes. So anyway, what happened was ended up taking the Raycor filter out, and that's a whole nother journey, but just to say that it caused issues for the season ahead was an understatement. So anyway, I got there. It was a big culture shock for me. I'd never seen Africa, and being a white fella in a black country is very, very interesting. And having a black crew that had never seen a marlin and could not speak English. So that was my setup. So a boat that didn't run, a crew that didn't speak English, and a crew that had never seen marlin, and I was supposed to take charters with this crew. So anyway, off I went the first day out of the marina. The owner never told me you couldn't steer the boat. So I came straight out of the marina, wrapped the boat up around a mooring buoy, put that in my wheel, It was just an absolute nightmare. They never told me about how rough it was going to be. They never told me about a thing called the wind machine. They never told me a thing about called the washing machine. And I went off fishing. It was an absolute nightmare. I couldn't eat for 3 weeks. I was so stressed. And the fishing was horrendous. Did not catch a fish in the best blue marlin fishing in the world for 3 weeks. So anyway, we started fishing and the fish turned up. And I'll never forget, the boys are like, it's on, the fishing's on, get down the bank. We got down the bank, and the first pass I made on the bank that day, I had a 600-pounder come and eat my short rigger, and then I had another 2 come and eat my other 2 lures out there, like they might have been 300 or 400 pounders. First time I ever saw a blue marlin in Cape Verde's triple header. Catch all 3. It was incredible. And that was like that for the next 2 months straight. I think I caught 100 and something in 30 days. Like, it was incredible. But what it taught me was I was told by the owner that my boat does not catch many fish. Don't worry if you're not the top, like if you're not in the top few boats. Your boat doesn't catch many fish, but it catches big ones. Well, the boat beside me had a German captain, and he gave me the name of the shit captain, and it really pissed me off, man, because like I was like, amongst the guys that you're fishing with, they were all like, there's a lot of ego in this marlin fishing, especially amongst the captains. I didn't really like being called the shit captain, eh? Like, it's not a great name to be called a Captain Kaka. You know, so I was like, and especially by a German fella, because I'm like, you don't even have marlin in Germany, man. You know, like, come on, man. So anyway, I was like, okay, how are we going to do better? I've got a crew that doesn't speak English. I've got a boat that's a handful. What do we have to do to be able to catch these fish and be like competitive with the rest of the top captains here? So I decided, okay, and I always remember these words from my captain in Kona. He's like, Bonze, this is a really simple thing we make complicated to realize it's simple. And those words always hung in my head. And please, hopefully if you take one thing out of this tonight, is those few words that I just said. This is a really simple thing we make complicated to work out that it's actually really simple. Okay? So I took that on board, and what I did was, I was like, okay, I'm going to take all the factors out of the picture that they can stuff up, and I'm going to control all the things that I can control. So what I ended up doing, we trolled 4 lures, and I had a number on every rod, and I had a board on the back of my cabin with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. I used to hang every lure on 1, 2, 3, 4. I then started running a parallel spread. So what that means is I had 2 lures on wave 3 and 2 lures on wave 5. And the reason I did that was nothing to do with fishing, was simply because there's a 50% chance of the boys stuffing up which rod went where. Because if it was a staggered pattern, they could get all the rods mixed up. So I was like, well, because it wasn't the problem setting the gear, it was when we caught a fish getting the gear back out, you need to get the gear back out fast because the fish are biting, so we need to be in the water again. If it was a staggered pattern, they could put lures in all different positions, and it would take an extra bit of time to get. On top of that, you couldn't steer the boat, so I had to have it even simpler because I couldn't leave the wheel to go down and fix any of the stuff-ups. So anyway, that was the first thing that we did, make it really, really simple. The second thing, which I'm going to talk about afterwards, is about my hook rigs and how I fished. But we must have got it pretty right, because the first season that I did it, there's a thing called the Billfish Foundation, and every year they have a competition, and they have it all around the world in different locations. But that year we were the top boat for Atlantic blue marlin releases tag fish in the Atlantic. For me, as a young captain, that's a massive deal because there's some pretty big names that I've fished with around the world that have won that award. So that was pretty cool. But just to make it like even better, we did exactly the same thing the following year. And that year we did it for release, which is even harder to win because every fish counts there. If you touch the leader, it's a caught fish. So I managed to, we managed to have a very successful season with some very untrained crews against extremely professional crews. So what I took out of it is exactly those few words that I said. This is a simple thing that we make complicated to realize it's actually simple, but you have to go through the journey. So when I tell you that this is a simple thing, I'm saving you so much time because you're not having to go through that whole learning thing, because it's human nature to go, it can't be that simple, but it actually is. So what I'm going to talk about next is I'm going to talk about lure fishing and what lures I sort of ran, how my spread was set up, and the hook rigs that I use. But I fish with a lot of captains around the world, right? Very, very good captains. And when we go lure fishing, they all have a totally different hook rig. They all have, different theories about what sort of hooks they should use and everything. But the one thing they do have in common is they all have a sharp hook. Who here knows what this thing is? Yeah, if you think it's a spatula, well, we've got a lot of work to work on here, mate. But yeah, it's a file. Who's got one? Yeah. We got a lot of them. The thing is, one simple piece of equipment that should be mandatory is one of these things, or a form of it, just get your hook sharp. So that's a variable that you can control that is going to help you, is getting a sharp hook. So regardless of what I'm going to talk about tonight with the way I do it, all of the captains that I know have sharp hooks, okay, that are good at it. There's no captain that I know that'll go to you, mate, blunting your hooks up. So that's a really simple thing, is make your hook sharp, The hook rig is another thing we can delve into a rabbit hole here, but I'm going to show you the hook rigs that I know. So before we get to that point, who here has actually caught a marlin? Who wants to catch a marlin? I want to catch one every time I go out. I want to catch every single one that becomes behind my boat. I don't, but I want to. So why did you, okay, we're lure fishing. We're not baits, we're lure fishing. Why did you catch that fish on a lure?
Hungry.
Yeah, a bit more. Just think about it a little bit more.
Luck.
Yeah, that's good. I'll take that. But nah, yeah, there's.
Probably easier to just drag a lure than fish a live bait.
Okay, I'll tell you my thoughts on it. I just always like to ask that because I like to see how people are thinking about the fishing. The reason why you probably caught the fish while you were lure fishing is because it was hooked, right? So what I learned, if I want to be a really good lure fisherman and I want to get those extra numbers up, I want to catch the one that's not hooked. That's how you're going to become a really good lure fisherman, right? So I'm going to run a rig and I'm going to run lures that will give me the best possibility, I hope, of hooking them. But I'm going to fish it in a way where if that fish doesn't get hooked good, I'm going to give myself a chance of catching that one. And that is what's going to give you your numbers. So when I first started in Cape Verde, I fished a very hard drag out of the clip, and I used to get a lot of fish just like that, knock me down and bugger off, pull a bit of string, come off, okay? And then I started thinking about it, and I fished with an American crew for a few days. He came with me, exceptional fisherman. He was my crewman in the Azores this year. When I fished the Azores, he's my crewman this year. So I fish with him a lot now. And he was telling me about catching white marlin in North Carolina. And he was like, yeah, man, like, you want to catch these things fast, you just have no drag on the fish. Anyway, I couldn't understand what he was talking about. So he fished with me, and we caught a couple of fish really quickly. And we had very little drag on these fish. So anyway, I got my brain ticking, and I'm going to talk about this little drag bit as we go on. But it got me thinking, when we were missing so many of these fish that just come in and like we had a hard drag on, because my theory at the time when I first started was, if the fish doesn't eat good, I want to rip that lure away from the fish so it comes back and eats again. And hopefully this time it comes back more aggressive and I hook that fish, right? My theory changed as I fished. My theory was, okay, that fish has given me a chance. How do I, because it wasn't working with them coming back and eating more. I was like, well, how about I try to catch those ones that are like that? Because they're giving me a chance. If they're giving me a chance, why don't we try to catch it? So it's all of a bit of a blended story, this. But what I started doing was, I started thinking about, okay, what hook rig, because I'm all about, I have 2 hook rigs that I'm going to talk about. Now, and that's slightly changed over time, because we think about things, and I talk to other people, and I try things, and that is just natural progression. But the 2 hook rigs that I've always used is, and how I looked at it at the start was, I'm always going to rig my lure to make it swim to its optimum, so I get more chances of raising fish and putting sharp hooks into fish. So I want my lure running to its absolute optimum. Because I feel if a lure is running to its optimum, I'm going to raise more fish, and I'm going to have more chances of putting hooks into fish. Okay? So if I break it down, it's really simple. A cup face lure like that, a bullet lure like that, or a flat face, anything with a symmetrical shape or a flat face or a bullet, I'm going to run a single swinging hook rig here like that. Now there's 2 reasons why I run this rig, okay? And I run that rig a long way back in the skirt, okay? So the 2 reasons I run that is it makes the lure run to its optimum, this hook rig here. See how it moves like that? The reason why I use a swinging hook rig first is so my hook rig lasts a long time. Because if I have a stiff rig and I don't have, and I like to leave the wire loose like that, over time this is going to shake the hook off. This wire is going to fail. The other reason I like it loose, and this is where I'm going to get to in the next part of this about keeping the fish hooked, is see I use a closed gape hook. That hook I feel is going to give me the best chance of keeping that fish on the bill, and it also gives me the best chance if that fish pins him, it's always going to naturally want to pull that hook in, okay? With a stiff rig, I found that I didn't find as many fish that I could get to have that pull in like that. So that's the hook rig that I use on the majority of my lures. The second hook rig that I use, and I really only use it on big stuff now, but I would have used to use this hook rig on every angle face lure that I used to run. It's like a 180-degree double hook rig, and the reason I run this hook rig is because it's like a rudder and a keel in a boat, right? If you got your keel and your rudder in line, that lure is going to run true and perform. Now, the thing is, things have slightly changed with lure manufacture over the years. Now we understand about keel weighting. In previous years, like when I first went to Hawaii and stuff, and we learned about lures, like stuff like a Joey Super Plunger, for example, is not a keel weighted lure. So you'd need to use a hook rig like this to make it run to its optimum. So that in a bigger lure like this kind of thing is what I'd probably run 2 hooks in just to make it. Actually, I wouldn't even run this much as a lure myself now. This would be more of a teaser, but if I'm running it as a lure, I'd definitely run 2 hooks in it because I feel it's going to swim better with the 2 hooks. But something like a violator, for example, I'm going to run the single swinging hook. If I had to pick one hook rig, that's the hook rig I'm going to pick to make it really simple, right? But if you want an angled face lure to run to its absolute optimum, a 180 degree and making sure everything's in line, front hook up, is gonna be your absolute optimum performer. Now, a couple of little tricks if you want to make the lure do, like you'll see guys talking about this on Instagram and stuff like that, but a couple of little tricks if you actually want to make your lures pull out to the side, and they talk about that a lot in Hawaii. You can make your lure track like port or starboard quite easily by just turning, like, so when you're looking, if you're looking out like this, you're going to put your lure out, say you want it to pull out to the starboard side, is just kick your front hook off to the starboard side, and that will make the lure naturally pull out. And you can do exactly the same thing with keel weighted lures with a single hook rig. If you want it to pull out to the side, you do exactly the same thing. It'll just turn your hook to the side you want it to pull out to, and it'll naturally pull out to that side. Now, saying that, it's nothing that's probably going to actually make your hookup rate any better. It's just going to put your lure out into clearer water, which is important, okay? So the reason I say it's important, because I've run quite a few boats over the years now, and boats like Bertram's and Black Watches and stuff like that have a lot of white water behind them, right? And then I'll run like a Merit boat or something like that, very narrow profile, and absolutely no wake behind them, nice and clean water. Now, what I personally have found is with the boats with a lot of white water, not necessarily like they raise a lot of fish, but I also get a lot of knockdowns that I don't see. With the cleaner wake boats, same amount of fish, no different in fish raising ability, but I found that they seem to eat a lot better. So if you're setting your spread, a really big thing that I'm an absolute stickler on lure fishing is getting all 4 of your lures up in the riggers in some capacity and getting them out into the cleanest water that you can. And it's got nothing to do with raising more fish. All it is, I feel, is that the fish is going to eat that lure better. So when I set up my spread, I am really a stickler for getting my lures to pull out and to be in the clear water as much as possible. Yeah.
We fish out of the Bertrams.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you've got your shorts out on the outriggers as well?
Mate,
Right behind.
you're not fishing unless you got all 4 lures in the riggers, mate.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even go fishing. I'm like, this is how passionate I am about it. If you go, hey man, like my days off are precious, right? Because I'm so busy. And you go, hey, I want to come fishing with you. I'd have to really like to go fishing with you, because I think you can do it way better. Like no really good boat in the world that lure fishes does not put them in the riggers. I don't know one. And I feel like so to explain this, man, I'm just a Kiwi boy from the Bay of Islands. I've got to fish with some of the best captains in the world. Like I'm a fanboy, man. Like I'll rock up and I'm like, holy shit, I'm like fishing beside these guys today. There's not one of these guys that really does it any amazing way. Like they keep it super simple. Like, and the reason is because they're confident, they've done it so much that they understand that they don't need to make it complicated. So I always look at it this way too, like a really easy way for people to relate to this. And the marlin fishing has got a really, everybody's got an opinion about it. But the opinion sometimes is from a pool of knowledge that's not very big. So the pool of knowledge that you talk to, like you guys all do jobs, whatever you do for a job, you're not going to listen to some guy that does it on the weekend for a couple of days a week, like at best a year, right? You're going to listen to the guy that you respect, that's on your level, and is going to teach you, right? So a lot of the knowledge that's put out there now, especially with social media, is correct, what they're saying. But the person that's saying it, quite often, their pool of knowledge is not that big. But what they're saying is exactly right. But they don't have enough of the bigger picture to be able to say these things with an actual authority, if you know what I mean. So that whole thing about, like, I'm really brutal about it, and I may come across as quite arrogant sometimes about it. The only reason I'm saying it is because I'm trying to help. It's coming from a place of like, I've been you. I was that person that caught nothing for years, and then I learnt. And now I'm in a position to fish with all these great people around the world that don't do it on what a lot of the social media's told, you know, like it's quite an interesting thing. But what you just asked me there is probably the biggest game changer you can ever do to your boat to make that boat catch more fish. So I do a podcast at home. If you ever get a chance to listen, this is going a little bit off topic, but it will help you. If I do a podcast at home with an ex-All Black, and how I got to know him was he did a podcast with the captain of the All Blacks, and I was like, man, your podcast sounds exactly how I think about marlin fishing. So he goes, oh, we should do a podcast. So I did a podcast with him. He went from catching bugger all to having a journey where he's probably one of the best fishermen in New Zealand that I know now. And if you ever get a chance to listen to that, because it's very interesting and it answers that question that you answered about running 2 lures off the rod tips. It's my biggest change. If I could only do one thing on a boat, lure fishing, and I was going to spend money over a sounder, over everything, and I love a sounder, I would change my outriggers. That's how passionate I am about that one change. I would spend money on my outriggers. It will catch you way more fish, man. Way more fish. So anyway, sorry, we got a bit sidetracked there, but it's just that's okay. So this whole talk tonight, man, I can go down so many rabbit holes. I can talk about marlin fishing till the cows come home, man. Like I'm eat up about it. But I've got to try to stay a little bit on topic, otherwise we're never going to get down the journey, you know. So hook rigs. So those are the 2 hook rigs, sharp hook. Okay. So as far as lure choice goes, really simple. I fish, if I have perfect conditions, I'm fishing one really aggressive like lure that's going to attack the surface, which is some kind of angle face normally like that. Maybe not necessarily quite as big as that, but and then opposite that I'll be fishing something that wants to dig down and hold deep. And then following that in the outriggers, I'll be running exactly the same. I'll be running a cup face lure that's going to track nice and straight, and normally a bullet lure off the other rigger. You'll notice I'm not running a shotgun. I really don't like a shotgun at all. If you want to run a shotgun, I would be running my long rigger one wave back further. And simple reason is just like, I'm talking about blue marlin fishing here. Blue marlin are a wild fish. I want as little gear to clear as possible. The more gear I have in the water, the more of a problem it is, and I'll talk about that as we go down the journey. So, all right. So, I've talked a little bit about lures, a little bit about hook rigs, a little bit about the presentation and the outriggers and stuff like that. But the next bit's really about what you do when you get a fish on, and that's a really interesting thing. So when everybody's fishing here, and you catch a fish, You get it to the side of the boat. Do you guys pay attention to how it was hooked? You should. It's going to teach you a lot of things. And the reason I say that is because it's going to dictate how the fish normally behaves. And like the thing, what I'm talking about here tonight is generalizations. Not every single fish does exactly what I say, but generalizations, you know, because they're fish and they do whatever they want. But generalizations are things that you can work with. So, who here has had a fish come in, eat like, say, a rigger, don't see the fish, and it rips half a spool of line off you, and it may do a jump away from you, or else it just like rips a truckload of line, and you're like, holy shit, man, I got a big one on here. Who else has had one that comes in, eats your lure, and just sits there and just turns the ocean to whitewater? Who's had that one? Okay. Which one you catch?
Second one.
Anybody else? Why?
First one would have been bill wrapped.
Yep.
It must be the second one because we've had like 4 in the first one that we haven't brought in.
Yeah, because you'll get that fish just come in. It's done exactly what we talked, exactly what you said. It's bill wrap. It's got it round its bill somehow. It's got no pain. It's got that leader. It's got something on its bill. It's panicking. So it just does a hard run. I mean, I hear it so many times. Yeah, we just got dusted by a grander. I'm like, yeah, mate. Like 250 pounder will dump a 130 in like 30 seconds if it's panicking. So the second fish, if you get that come and eat your lure and it turns the ocean to whitewater behind it, you're like, if that thing stays on that initial thing, that fish is hooked and it's hurting. And that's why it's going so crazy, because it's hurting, it's hooked. So that's why I say it's really important to look at how the fish behaves on the bite, and then how, like when you get it to the boat, so you can learn, oh yeah, that behavior will dictate how I'm going to fight the fish coming up, okay? So, since we were talking about catching that fish that's not hooked, right? And we've got one that's hooked, and we catch those fish, eh? Like, that's the fish we catch, the hooked one. So we're going to try to catch that one that's not right now, right? So, if we look at a marlin, right? Who's been on the boat and you got your mate on the rod, you got your mate on the wheel, and the fish starts jumping towards the boat, and all you hear is, go ahead, I got slack line, gun it, man. Who's been on that boat? I've been on that boat shitloads, and I guarantee you there's more than anybody, nobody's put their hand up because that's bullshit. I've been on the boat. Yeah. So, otherwise you guys, there's no point, like, otherwise everyone, like, knows it, man, but, like, everyone's about keeping their line tight, right? We need to keep the line tight? Got to keep it tight, eh? Yeah. Well, in lure fishing, this is where we're going to learn to angle tonight. We're not going to learn to drag and snag. We're going to learn to actually angle here. Now, if you look at a marlin, right, it's got a long bill, and it's got a body and a tail. So, we're in the boat, we've got the fish jumping towards us, we've got old mate screaming at us, we've got captains pinned it, coming tight on the fish. Where do you think the lure's going to end up once we come tight on that fish that's jumping towards us? In front of the fish, right? What do you think's going to happen if that fish isn't hooked? Yeah, why? It's going to pull the lure straight off the bill. So, if, like, as a captain, it's the best thing for me when a fish jumps towards the boat, because it's doing two things. It's wearing itself out, it's putting a belly in the line for me, and what I'm going to let that fish do is that I'll have my angler going, oh, it's gone slack. I'm like, okay, the line's not slack. Slack at the angler's end, but it's not slack at the fish end. So who here, because this is a really good thing for you guys to do, who here has actually run, say, a couple of 100 meters of like any size line out behind their boat doing 7 or 8 knots? Who's tried that? No lure on it, just a swivel. Who's done that? You should try it, because what it's going to teach you is actually how much drag the line is putting on from just line drag, let alone lure, fish, angler. The amount of drag the line has out in your belly is a lot. Okay, so you never actually have slack line when you have that belly. So keeping the belly in lure fishing, where's it going to keep the lure? Yeah, behind the fish. So if you think about it, in that case, say the fish is jumping towards us, lure's behind the fish, it's got to go, so if it's not hooked, it's got to go down the bill, across the dorsal, all the way down to the tail to come off. You're pretty bloody unlucky if it does that, right? So what I'm thinking at that stage is, all I'm doing is, say my boat's parked here, fish is here, it's jumping. Instead of going, like driving away, coming tight on it, all I'm going to do is let that fish jump around. I'm going to turn my boat to run, like to sit parallel like that. I'm just going to get my angler to pick up the belly and let the fish go past me, and I'm just going to go boom, straight across in behind it again. So all I'm doing the whole time I'm fighting is trying to keep the lure behind the fish. Okay, so this is cool while the fish is on the surface, right? So at this point, right, so we'll get into a little bit of drag setting here. So at this point, all I'm trying to do, this is normally start of the fight, I'm trying to manage the amount of line loss I'm getting, so hence only 4 lures at the most. No shotgun, because I want to get after the fish as quickly as possible and manage how much line I'm losing out at the same time. But what I'm trying to do is keep the fish on the surface at that stage, because while the fish is on the surface, I have a chance of maneuvering my boat after that fish. As soon as it goes down, I have no control of that fish at all, okay? And the reason I'm trying to keep it close is because there's 2 factors here. Is if the fish is a long way out, I have very little control when it goes down. And the other thing is, if I have a lot of line out when the fish decides to go down, who here goes diving? Okay, so you know that at a certain point in time, that once you get to a certain depth, you just keep plummeting, right? It's exactly the same with the marlin. So if he decides to go down and you've got a lot of line out, you've got to try to stop that fish, okay? So all I'm trying to do, as I said, is manage my line loss, stay connected to that fish, and keep that a little bit of belly and keep behind that fish at the start of the fight. Now, what I'm doing at this stage to do this is I'm only using just enough drag to gain line, right? Whether that's I can gain line at 5 kilos, whether I can gain line at 6 kilos. I'm only using enough drag to gain line. I don't have it set at the strike, the third of a thing, a third of the drag of the whatever line I'm using. Now the reason for that is, and this is the absolute key to it, is I want to save up my sleeve the biggest change of drag I can possibly have. And this little morsel of detail that I'm giving you here is the absolute, it will catch you the fish like right there and then. Now, who here has had a blue marlin die on them? Why'd it die?
Heart attack. Skip a set.
Yes. I mean, I used to have that when I first started. I have very, very few blue marlin die on me now, and big ones. And this little tip I'm going to give you here will help you sort that out. So at some stage, that blue marlin's going to decide to go down, right? And that's why I said you want to be close to it, you want to be behind it, and you want to have as little drag on it at this stage as possible. Now, when it decides to go down, it's either doing one of two things. It's either just going down for a rest, or it's going down to die. And when it goes down to die, I hear a lot of the time, marlin's just done a really big run. Like, I'm like, is it still alive? They're like, yeah, just done a massive run straight down. I'm like, yeah, does it just get faster and faster? They're like, yeah, it just ripped us, like smoked us. I was like, oh, how deep are you reckon? Oh, I'm like 450. Oh, yeah. How much line you got out? Like, oh, 500. I was like, yeah, it's dead on the bottom, man. No, just done a massive run straight down. It possibly can't be. I'm like, it's dead on the bottom. They're like, I'm like, well, what are you going to do? Oh, we're going to have to come up on the drag. Well, in my mind, at this stage, what you want to do before it gets to that point is you've got a big drag change in your pocket right now. You're reasonably close to the fish. You've got a chance now, okay? So at this stage, what I do is, like, I know I'm behind the fish, I've got a bit of angle, I'm just gonna smash it with drag. As much drag as I can put on it, and one big shock. And that shock is quite often enough to shock the fish if it's still alive, bring it back to the surface, and if that's the case, bring it back to the surface, I'll back the drag off and just use enough drag again to keep that, to gain line. I'll chase it while it's on the surface. If it goes down again, I'll do the same process. The second reason I do it is if that fish is dead, I've got a really good chance of stopping it right there at that moment, because I would rather get rid of it there if it's dead and give myself a chance, or give myself a chance of catching it, than getting it to the bottom, or even, like, because you fish pretty deep out here, I'm guessing like 1,000 meters sometimes in blue marlin fishing. Yeah, and you have a lot of current. You ain't going to lift that thing, even on 130 half the time if it's a good one. 500 or 600 pound fish, you get 600 meters out, it gets in that current. Very difficult job to lift that fish, even on heavy tackle, because you probably have 3 or 4 knots of current, big fish deep on you, and you're trying to pull it up on a small, I mean, still heavy tackle, but it's a small line compared to how big that fish is. So that little moment there, if you can do it, and you have the confidence to, like, so now who, because I always say this is like fishing without fear, because you have lots of confidence, you're like, oh, man, I'll give it a crack, you know? And I was lucky enough to be in places where there was lots of fish, so I got to have that mindset. But who here at home gets all their gear and breaks it? So do you guys all, so obviously everybody now then just waits till they get a big fish on, oh man, we'll test it out now, see if it breaks, eh? Yes, I know we're all laughing and that, but like at the time you're like pissed off. So get your gear and break it. So at least then you have an idea of what you're dealing with. You know, like, these are all things we can control before we go fishing. So, like, yeah, that's another really good thing to go and try, is actually learn your gear, what you're dealing with, okay? So you've got to that point. Now, the biggest thing is, though, who fishes in a trailer boat here? Okay. Now, I'm talking a lot about this as heavy tackle fishing, right? Now, there's one small issue with that whole thing about hitting it with lots of drag, because I hear a lot of guys like, oh man, I can pull 20 kilos of drag, stand up and all this. Bullshit, man. Like, there's very few anglers that I know around the world that can pull those kind of drags. And the other thing that the problem is, in our trailer boats, normally they're not that heavy, right? So I talk about hitting it with drag and staying behind the fish. Well, there's a problem with that. And you guys will definitely have noticed this. I'm sure people will have lost fish like this. How many times have you actually lost a fish with a lot of drag on it, and you'll get right up on top of it, and then bang, pull a hook? You had that happen? Like, you get straight up and down on the fish and pull a hook. And that's because you've lost track of where the fish is. So what you do when you put drag on, because you put lots of drag on, what it does is it actually pulls the boat on top of the fish all the time. So you'll put lots of drag on and just pull the boat over the top of the fish all the time. Because it doesn't take 20 kilos to pull your boat along. You know, like a lot of them are not that big, and it'll pull you over the fish. So when you go to apply the drag on the little boat and you go to apply the drag, put your boat in reverse or forwards or whatever which way it is to pull away from that fish. So then you're actually applying drag to the fish, not letting the fish pull the boat over the top. So then that controls you to keep angle on the fish and stay behind the fish. And that will reduce the amount of times that you get pulled straight up over the top of the fish. You as a captain loses contact where the fish is, and you lose it, could change direction, bang, hook comes straight off. Happened to me so many times. So, yeah, so that's the handful of things that I'm thinking when I'm fighting a fish. Like, as I said, I keep it real basic because we could get into a lot more things, but that whole change of drag, using just enough drag to gain line, staying behind the fish with a little bit of belly, and then that, as I say, that change of drag, that will become some of the secrets that will help you catch more fish on lures. Now, as I said earlier, I fished with a very, very good crew from America. And he goes to me, you need to come and fish white marlin with me in North Carolina. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. So anyway, I went and I saw the fishing there. And that's where I first saw a dredge. I'd never seen a dredge before. And I saw the white marlin fishing, how they were fishing for white marlin with a ballyhoo or a gar and a 30-pound rod and a 50-pound fluorocarbon leader with a circle hook. So the thing though that I was really intrigued by was they have a bycatch there of like a 200 to 300-pound blue marlin. And I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. We caught the bycatch on the 30-pound line with the 50-pound fluorocarbon leader. And we caught it no problem, like easy. So anyway, I got thinking and I was like, so at home in New Zealand, and this is where I'm going to talk about in New Zealand quite a bit here, but it is still relatable to fishing, especially some of your light tackle inshore fish, like the black marlin and that. But I'm really going to talk about now what learning to catch big fish with heavy hooks taught me about what I can catch on some smaller hooks. So in New Zealand, the average fish there is like a 90 kilo to 100 kilo striped marlin with a bycatch of probably a 200 kilo blue marlin is our standard blue marlin. And anyway, I'd been in North Carolina. I was like, man, their blue marlin is very similar, like bycatch is very similar to the fish that we catch in New Zealand, similar size. And I was like, well, now I've just been to Cape Verde for the last 2 seasons and we've been catching these big fish on very little drag. I'm like, now I can understand that. I'm pretty sure we could use a lot smaller hooks for fishing for these smaller fish and get a better hookup rate. So I always used to feel that I don't think I'd get beaten or I'd have a very hard chance of getting beaten by a blue marlin on 30-pound over in Cape Verde. Unless I got a big one that went down on me, I feel like I've got enough in my arsenal to give the 30-pound really big fish a good crack. So I was like, okay, if that's the case, I reckon now I can try a lot smaller hook on our standard fish over there. So I went to the tackle store in the States. I spent nearly every penny I'd earned for the season. I bought dredges, I bought like electric reels, all sorts of stuff to run my boat. I bought my boat. I've got a little 16-foot tinny at the time. I set it up with a really good set of outriggers, put all 4 lures in the riggers, put teasers in, and I put a dredge into my spread. And I went fishing with some little fly fishing hooks, like a SL12 is what it used to be called, I think, a Gamakatsu SL12. And that season, I didn't do a lot of fishing, but I didn't miss a fish on these lures with the little hooks. Anyway, I was lucky enough to take the owner of BKK fishing with a friend of mine. And BKK is a hook brand, I'm sure most of you would know that. And he caught a fish on these little hooks. Anyway, he said, oh, we can make a hook for this. So I was lucky enough that we developed this light gauge hook that we have here that I'm going to talk about. So I thought, well, these little hooks are going to give me a better opportunity of hooking fish now. Whereas before I was always trying to catch the one that was round the bill. I know that the hooks are thin, they're going to penetrate more, but we're always going to be at a disadvantage of strength because you're trying to compare something that's that thick to something that's that thick, right? And we'd always use that hook for something like what I spoke about, the little black marlins, inshore fishing. Well, back in New Zealand now, that's pretty much the standard hook that we use. That majority of fishermen at home fishing for that 90 to 100 kilo fish will fish with that little hook there. Now, it comes with a few, how would I say, problems. If you would say, it comes with a lot of maintenance. So if you were a lazy fisherman and you didn't want to rig your gear well, like and look after it, I would not suggest that that is for you because that hook there is disposable. It's got about 5 days in it and then throw it away. It's also a one fish hook rig. So we came up with that hook, and I was very skeptical whether it would work for everyone because there was no education at the time, and I never spoke about fishing like I speak about it tonight with the drag change and the drag management and that kind of stuff. And I bought it out, and I'll be straight up with you, it was a disaster. And I had my feelings hurt really badly. And I'm really honest about all the things because I thought this was going to be an absolute game changer, and it simply came down to people not understanding drag control and angling. It's taken, I'd say, 6 to 7 years in New Zealand for people to understand this. And what happened was a bunch of young guys got into marlin fishing, became cool at home. Before it was never cool. I used to get teased at school about marlin fishing. Now I laugh at those guys that take their money that were mates at school, so, anyway, but what it did, it brought a whole new range of people into marlin fishing and with a whole different background and perspective on marlin fishing. So I was now getting a bunch of young kids that were all of the social media age and were all about education, about what's online and learning. And they started doing it from a position where they actually knew nothing about, they never had any preconceived ideas about marlin fishing. And I was very lucky that a handful of them became very good and were very good with influence. And it got to the point where a lot of the older charter guys were so pissed off that the young kids were catching more than them that they started calling us the Mafia. And you'll notice I'm wearing a t-shirt, it's called the Mafia. And at home, it's a massive deal, is the Mafia. And what they learnt out of that, all of the guys, it not necessarily meant they all used these hooks, but what it taught a lot of the guys at home was to be a better fisherman with heavy hooks as well. Because if you fish that hook like we would traditionally with a third of the drag of your main line, it's going to snap it. Now, does everyone understand how a reel works and how to set your drag and everything like that you've got to set it with a full spool, right? Okay. So I'm going to get into that whole, delve back a little bit into that whole line drag thing here because it's really important because that's going to help you understand about the reel as well. So when you set the reel, it's full, right? Like you've set the drag, the reel's full spool. Okay. So say you get a bunch of line out in the water. You've got a lot of line drag in straight away, right? That you've got, say, half a spool out. You've got line drag in the water, and your spool's smaller. Okay. So what do you think the reel's doing at this stage? Why? Okay, it's like a tire iron, right? So you get a tire iron that's nice and long, and that's where your spool's full, so you can pull it, and that's where you've set your, say, 5 kilos, whatever number you've set, right? But then say you cut your tire iron in half. Imagine how much harder that is to pull. So who's been on the boat when you've got your mate, got a lot of line out, and they're like, man, I've got to stop this fish. And they push the drag up. Who's done that? I've done that. What happens? Break it, man. And they go, fuck it, man. I'm going to get stronger line. I'm going to get stronger line. I'm like, you're going to do exactly the same thing with stronger line, mate. It doesn't matter how strong your line is. You're going to break it. So, I'm sort of going to talk about for the rest of the talk, and I'm just going to open it up to questions, is really the biggest thing is about learning about angling to make yourself a better lure fisherman and understanding what line drag does, understanding how a team works together to catch a fish. So that whole thing about the line drag to me is the most important part of learning about lure fishing and staying connected to fish, because quite often what we think is actually happening is the complete opposite. So, you've got your mate in this situation going, oh man, I've got to push the drag up. Well, it's the complete opposite. It takes balls, man, that you've got half a spool out or whatever it is, or the fish is smoking you, to drag the drag back. Because you're like, shit, I'm going to lose even more line. Well, no, what you're going to do is give yourself a chance of staying connected to that fish so you can catch it. And the only way you're going to catch that fish in that scenario is drive your boat. You aren't going to catch it. If you want to catch these fish by dead boating them, and that, it's not going to happen. You're going to end up with a lot more dead fish. And we don't do this, in my mind. You need to respect that fish and give it the best chance of having a chance that you can let it go, and giving a chance that you can let it go in a healthy state, right? And the other thing, it's a hell of a lot more exciting to catch these things relatively quickly. And the other thing is too, I don't know many anglers that can do hours on end and not feel really good at the end of it. So we get a lot of charters that come on, and where I fish in the Azores, the average fish there is 500-600 big blue marlin. And they all turn up, like when you go, so everyone does a charter, what do you want to catch? Well, when we go fishing every day, we'll catch the biggest one, eh? Oh yeah. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, me. So you get the customer comes on, want to catch a big one. I'm like, oh yeah. Gets a 900 pounder on. Oh yeah, put the drag up on it, you know, we've got pulling 60 pounds of drag on this thing when it's gone down. And they're crying. And like, oh, you told me you wanted a big one, you got it on. Like, be careful what you wish for. So this is the whole thing, like, learning how to catch them relatively quickly too, because there's not many anglers that can withstand big fights, you know, and there's not many fish that can withstand big fights. So if you can be relatively aggressive with your maneuvering, will definitely help that. And the thing is, like, you don't have to be a madman. You see, like, I mean, if you ever go on YouTube, you see some of my, like, driving and stuff, and the boat looks like it's going like a bat out of hell. I drive a 40 Blackwatch. Pinned, it does 4 to 5 knots in reverse. Like, it's not they're not fast. Like, there's very few boats that are out there that are fast boats in reverse. Most of the time I have to turn the boat around and chase it forwards if I really have to get after a fish. So you actually don't need to, especially in a trailer boat, you and gear with a little bit of revs on it is doing way faster than any of those big boats will do in forwards. If you want to watch some of the best driving that you'll ever learn from in a trailer boat, is watch the boys at Peak Sport Fishing. I would rate that as some of the best driving you'll get to see on YouTube of staying behind fish and see them driving. They take it to a full extreme, but you can definitely learn some from from some of the ways that they drive. But yeah, so that whole thing about trying to catch them relatively quickly, those few tools and those few things like to do with your drag management will help you a lot to get that fish back up on the surface. Yeah.
Can I ask, sorry for another question?
Yeah, no, mate, like, look, I pretty much really sort of finished what I'm going to chat about, but it's more now I can just, like, answer any questions and we can go down whatever rabbit hole you sort of want to, you know?
Staying on that topic of, like, increasing the drag when it's diving down, it's nearly the polar opposite of what you just said. You know, if you're losing a whole bunch of line and backing it off a little bit, how do you know?
Because you've got way too much line out if you're in that position already. You can't do that. That's what I said about. So when you're, so what do you, like, so just give me a rundown of what you do when you hook a fish.
I'd like to hook one first. But,
No, like what? Just like yeah, like we all want to hook more of them.
like a gal.
Yeah.
Clean the deck, let it run.
What are you doing with the boat at this stage?
That's up to Duncan.
Well, if we, immediately on hooking, I would keep the boat forward, clean the gear up, get
Oh, yeah.
everything out, and then,
Okay.
yeah, that's my initial thought.
Yeah. So, okay. So what are you doing? So what are you doing? Like just let's put this in perspective because you asked the good question here. What did I talk about? What I do on the start of the fight? What I'm trying to manage? How am I doing? What are you doing?
Well, backing up or chasing after us,
No, you're not. You just told me you're driving off after it. You're driving forwards.
driving forwards to get the gear out,
Yeah, why?
you wouldn't do that.
Mate, I got eaten. I'm hooked.
Right.
Like, okay, so you go bottom fishing. You hook the fish. Do you drive off?
Okay.
So I've got eaten. All I'm doing, and mate, that thing comes out of the clip. I'm like, bang. Well, I'm hooked. It's either on there, or it's not. And if it's not on there, and it's round the bill, I'm like, man, I want to keep that thing on there, so I'm slack line. Like, back that drag off. Get that lure, get some belly in the line straight away. Because I'm just trying to get that lure behind the fish straight away. If I know, like if I get eaten and it's smoking, it's come up jumping, I'm like, oh, sweet, you know, like just let's keep connected to it. All I'm doing as a captain at that stage is minimizing my line loss with the boat maneuvering. Whether that's turning the boat in a trailer boat in a circle towards the fish and going after it. If it's in the big boat, I'm backing through my spread. And you don't have to be as aggressive as what I am because I have a professional crew in that. But all I do is if I got eaten, pull my boat back to an idle at the bare minimum. Okay? Pull the one lure. So say you got eaten on your port side, I'm pulling my port rigger in. Say, for example, I got bitten on my port corner. I'm like pulling that in and I'm maneuvering my boat after that fish. Those other two lures you don't actually have to clear straight away. Because if you back this way, you've got the whole, this is your transom, right? And you've cleared this whole side. You've got all of that room to go whichever way you want towards that fish, right? Those other two lures can be cleared as long as you don't put them in your wheels while you're doing it. You can clear them up there. They're not going to get in the way. And then on a trailer boat, if you do that, you say you got bitten on this side, you got eaten on this side, you just turn your boat that way and just start making your way around. You're trying to minimize your line loss. So to answer your question, I try to really not get in that situation. So when you're in that situation, the word is you're fucked. And there's only two of you? Yeah. Put 3 lures out. Run less gear. I'm probably the worst lure salesman in the world right now. But so there's a thing that's come out called a sonar. The sonar is amazing, right? But there's one thing it's taught you, like taught us, is if you don't actually run over the fish, like right over the top of it, it's not gonna eat. So, you know, we all used to think, we get the occasional one that comes from a distance, but I always used to remember, like, man, if there's one within a couple 100 meters, man, my boat's a vacuum, it'll suck them up. So I've got more stuff out there, more gear out there doing whatever, and they're just gonna come to. Well, that's actually not true anymore, that's been proven. So I would fish, if I was fishing, like, say, two-handed, I would still have a full spread out, but I would only have 2 with hooks in them, or maybe 3 with hooks in them. I would have 2 teasers on electric reels up in my riggers, so I still have my corners. I'd have a pitch lure. We'll never pitch bait because I don't have time to do the baits because I've only got a handful of days to go fishing and I want to go fishing tomorrow, so I need to have the gear ready. So I would fish the 2 teasers. I'd have a pitch lure, and the reason why I'd have a pitch lure is because only 2 of us, I don't have to slow the boat down, I don't have to put the boat in a turn when I do my pitch, and then I'd just have my 2 lures with the hooks in it. So if I hooked up on the pitch, I'm only clearing the 2 riggers, and I'd only have to clear 1 rigger, and I could leave that other one out and chasing the fish. Or if I hooked it on the pitch, I hooked it on the lure, I'm only clearing that 1 rod again, and the other 2 are just buttons and the gears in. So that's what I would do if I was fishing two-handed. I'd fish pretty much the same spread, but I'd only have 2 hooks in the lures.
What lure are you using to pitch with?
This is my favorite to pitch with, man. That thing right there, Trojan. But only with 1 skirt on it. 1 skirt, and I'm pitching with normally a double rig 8-0.
Are you fishing it like you would like your bait switching?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to let it...
Nah, I'll rod tip it, man. Just as soon as it eats it, just boom, and then once I feel it ripping line, just pull it off to the side. So how I got into doing that was I used to get charters in Cape Verde that want to pitch, and I have a crew, once again, that doesn't speak English, and I didn't have any coolers, and the other thing I didn't have on the boat was I didn't have an autopilot, and the boat didn't drive straight at all, like literally did not drive straight. I used to go down the bank, and I'd be weaving like this, and the other boats would be trying to get out, like, I'm like, mate, I'm not messing with you, I'm not trying to put you on port, I just can't steer this thing. So, literally, I lost my complete train of thought, man, sorry. Pitch, yeah, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna the customer wants to pitch. Well, the only way we can do the pitching is with a lure, because I don't have to slow the boat down. Don't have to put it in a turn, and they still get the experience of pitching the fish off the teaser. So that's how I got into the pitching of the lures, and it was very, very successful. And there's still, there's a lot of the good crews that still pitch with a lure. I had a really good pitch lure, was a pelagic jandal that we made a pitch bait out of. I cut the jandal into like a diamond and had a double hook rig in that, and that thing used to slay. So yeah, pitching a lure is a really good way of switching.
And when they're holding onto it, drag it.
I just got it set at like my third of a thing, and third of the strike. Yeah. And then once he's eaten it, I'll back the drag off again. And as I said, I'm only using enough drag to gain line. So if you can, it always took me a long time to understand that, because I was so used to fishing at a third of the breaking strain of the line that I didn't realize that you can actually back the, it's so stupid, this fishing, it's a head thing. Oh, I can back the drag off and I can still gain line. Now that I do it, I'm like, why would you have it up any higher? Because it's in my head now that's how I think. So much of this fishing is this thing. So that's another thing I probably should talk about, is when you go fishing, it's maybe a little bit different here because you guys don't fish structure as much as what you would, say, up in Exmouth. You fish a lot more structure than probably what you'd fish down here, because it sounds like you fish really deep here, like a long way offshore, and a lot of current too, you know. So fishing in Exmouth, obviously got the current, but you've also got the edge and canyons and stuff to fish. So when I see a lot of guys go fishing and they're like, okay, I did 100 miles today, Bonze, caught nothing. I'm like, oh, shit happens, mate. It's just how it goes. And there's just no fish. And I'm like, oh man, there's actually fishing was pretty good. We caught 3 or 4 today, you know, and you're like, oh, let me have a look at your chart. And I go have a look at their chart. And they've come out of the harbour, they've gone out to point A, trolled past that, gone around the back of whatever place they've gone down the coast, then come back into the harbour. I was like, geez, you did a lot of travelling there. Yeah, I was travelling to find the fish, man. I was like, oh yeah. I was like, that whole time, how much time did you think you spent in one place? Oh, well, yeah, I fished that real good spot. I was like, yeah, well, how long did you spend there though? I was like, by the look of it, you spent like 2 minutes there, mate. Oh, yeah. So then you ask them, it says, okay, do you go bottom fishing? And then they look at you like an idiot. I'm like, yeah, of course I go bottom fishing. I was like, well, run me through your day going bottom fishing. Oh, yeah. So I go out. I've got my favourite spots, you know, and I'll go there, I'll either anchor up or I'll drift on the reef. I was like, oh, yeah. I'm like, so what happens when you say you're drifting and you drift off the reef? Do you catch anything? Well, occasionally. I was like, oh, where do you normally catch a fish? Well, we catch them when we're on the structure, eh? I'm like, oh, yeah. And what would you do when you drift off? Well, I'll drive back up and get on the structure. Oh, yeah. So what do you reckon you did out there marlin fishing today? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't do any of that, did I? I'm like, nah. So, one little tip is, and the problem is the boat's got a motor, right? And we move. So I think it's natural that if you haven't got the right mindset again, that you just drive all over the ocean and these marlin just jump on. Well, they're exactly the same. There's another thing, it's a simple thing. We're catching a snapper, mate. It's pretty much, you've got to stay where the fish is. You know when you're snapper fishing or whatever it is, the fish doesn't bite the whole time. you have your tide change and that's when you get your good fishing, and then you have a lull, all your fish, and there's a lull for half an hour, and then another run of fish will come on and you get a bunch of bites. And then that'll die off again, another run of fish will come through, you wait, another hour later you'll get another bunch of bites. The marlin fishing is exactly the same thing, but you have to be in that zone when they decide to bite. So my day running out to a spot, I'll use a few different things. I'll use a little bit of SST, bit of altimetry, bit of that kind of stuff. I use beers. Beers are really good because you go to the club or something or a pub or whatever it is and you're talking to fishermen that have fished that day and they have a couple of beers. 9 times out of 10 they want to tell you all about their day, and you can find out exactly where they fished. They're like, oh no shit, you had 5 bites there? Oh mean. I'm like, oh that's sweet, mate. That kind of information to me is the absolute game changer, because I'm going to go over any SST, anything is normally, I'm going to go where the people tell me the fish are. That's the biggest thing. So I'll go out, I'll listen, I'll make my plan for the day. And also a little bit of local knowledge helps a lot. But I don't have local knowledge here, so I don't know necessarily. So I'd use reading my chart, listening to people, getting a little bit of local knowledge if I can, and then I'd plan my day. And I'd have a few spots up my sleeve that I was going to think of. So I'd get to the first spot, and I'd do a few passes, and if I liked what I saw, I will fish that spot through a tide. And if I don't like what I see, I'm not going to muck around. I'm either going to put the boat on the plane and go to another spot, or I'm just going to troll in a dead straight line. And I may get lucky on the way across there and run across a bunch of fish. You never know. But that's blind luck. It's not through, because the fish could be in the middle of nowhere and I just happen to stumble across them. If I stumble across one, I'm probably going to give it a good amount of time if I've run across one, because if there's one there, there'll be more there, okay? So if I don't run across one, I'm going to go fish my next spot, and I'm going to look at the signs again. I'm going to do exactly the same thing until I find a spot that I feel good about. And who's heard of that feeling to trust your gut? It's massive, man. Like we'll go fishing somewhere and the guy goes, oh, why are you fishing here? I says, oh, it's because it feels good. Bang, we'll catch one. And I had no other real, like apart from, yeah, I saw some bait, sort of looked good, but I feel good about the spot. It's got a lot to do with it. Got a lot to do with it, trusting your instinct and your gut, that you go, I think there's a fish here, I'm going to put my time in. The amount of times that gives you success is quite high. So trust in what you feel. But yeah, so that's a big thing. But when I get to a spot, there's 2 things I'll do. If I like what I see, I'm going to fish this, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zero my GPS down, and I'm going to pick a spot that I want to run across the most times, right? Now, I'm going to line that spot up to run across that spot as many times with the sea conditions, if I possibly can, quartering the sea. So I'm going to have it on my bow quarter and my stern quarter. I'm trying to eliminate the amount of times that I run up sea or down sea. Now, the next piece of electronics that I would say is essential lure fishing, aside from obviously a sounder and GPS, is an autopilot. So I see a lot of people drive around in circles with lures out. It's changed a little bit now that it's got a sonar because you have to, but lures are designed to run consistently, and the best way to get them to run consistently is driving your boat in a straight line, not driving around in a circle like a fish. Yeah, I get these guys, oh yeah, but the lure is like a fish. I'm like, it's not a fish, it's a lure. So the best way to present a lure is consistently, right? It's like a topwater lure, you pull that in a straight line. It presents consistently. and you give it the odd twitch and stuff like that. And yeah, you can do the same thing with lures with the odd like S or something if you've got a fish up behind the lure. But if you want your lures to run consistently, drive the boat in a straight line. So I will grid out the spot and I will run my boat as many times as I possibly can across that spot that I've picked, or in a grid pattern in an area where there's fish, in as many straight lines, quartering the sea with as little up and down sea as possible. So what I would do, say we're fishing in a strong current out here and the current's pushing me down, because it's very hard to fight the current sometimes, I'll do as many passes across the current. And the reason for that is I'm fishing across the current, which is normally quartering. The reason for that as well is like fish are probably traveling down the current. I'm presenting more time towards more fish to be able to cut them off. If I was just traveling with the current and into the current, I've got less chance of crossing fish, right? So I'll fish across the current as much as possible as well. But if I was fishing in the current there and I got pushed down, I'd get to the end of my run. And then once I was pushed down, I would turn around, direct straight line, just go pound my way up sea for however long it took me to get to the top of my run again. And then I'd do exactly the same thing down. I would do as little as possible, as I said, straight up sea and straight down sea. So that's something that's caught me a lot of fish personally, is fishing like that. And autopilot is my absolute, like lure fishing is the best thing ever. So
you wouldn't use like a zigzag pattern?
yeah, I would.
Yep.
I would, but in a scaled down area. Yeah, for sure. Like, how do I say this? Boring fishing, because I get guys go, man, I just saw you stay in that place all day. Well, you catch any? You catch? Oh, yeah, we caught a couple, and they're like, oh, okay. The only reason I stayed there is because I'm bottom fishing. I'm trying to put the lure there when the fish wants to eat. So, yeah, like if it's an area, I will definitely scale my GPS down and I'll just grid it out, like just straight lines, like in that grid. And then, as I say, once I get down to the end of my run, boom, straight up, back up the top, and then just start zigzagging down again. Yeah, so I'm not always necessarily running over the same mark. On structure, I want to be fishing on the same mark because the fish will sit on an edge. Like, because you've got your current, it might be half a mile off that edge, but that's where your fish are sitting, so you want to run across that point as much as possible, not necessarily zigzag across the structure. You want to be fishing on, the fish are going to hold on some upwelling. It's either going to be an upwelling on the front edge. So it's like, say you get to a bit of structure, where, like in the current, say you've got structure here and you've got current ramming in here, and you've got a backside as well, right, with current on the, with trail on the back. Where would you fish? Yeah, why?
That's where the baits come out.
Yeah, so you're going to have two places that you're going to fish. Exactly what you said there, right on the front. So if you see a chart, like a current chart, like a really basic way to get this, to read a current chart, is if the arrows are pointing this way to a point, it's probably a good place to try, because you know that current's going to be ramming in there. So what's going to happen is you're going to get 2 points of like where I would fish, and a fish on that front side, and I'm going to have a look up to probably a mile off that current, off that structure, because you get your upwelling will be like that. And quite often and all I'm looking for on that point is where the bait is. Right? But then I will also go and have a look on the back side of the structure, and I'll see if there's any bait holding on there. And quite often, you'll catch your fish on the back side as well. So those are the two places. Like if I get to a point, like a bit of structure and there's bait, I'm going to look at where the current is, where the bait's sitting, and I'm just going to sit exactly as many times across that edge where the bait's sitting, because that's where marlin's going to be in my mind, you know. And then might do, say I did 20 passes there and I hadn't seen shit, I might just do one run down to the backside, have a look on there, do a couple of passes there, and then come straight back onto that one, just give it a break for a bit. But as I said, everything is in this thing right here. It's whatever you think is going to work after you've read all the signs.
Right now, there's, I guess, a lot of current at the back of the Perth Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
But the
section, from what I can see, there's very little at all.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend them venturing further out to where the current's ripping a lot harder? Or?
I'd be looking for, like, if that current stopped, I'd be looking there personally. Like if there's a swirl, because what the current, from what I've seen, and I don't know out here, I'm only talking about places that I fish. So like you fish, say, the Gulf Stream in North Carolina, you're actually looking for slow water, because if you have lots of current, the bait can't hold. So you're trying to find an eddy which is just slow, so then everything can stay there and you can actually fish it. Because if you're fishing in a current, say, of 4 knots, over the day, if you fish in the same place, there's, say, 10 hours, there's 40 miles of water gone past you. So there's 2 ways to look at it. Is you're going to find a fish traveling in that current that you've intersected. So that's one way you could fish the current like that, or else you want to try to find an eddy of slow moving water, in my opinion. But sometimes you don't have that.
At the moment.
So you aren't going to have consistent fishing for much longer, in my opinion. You're only always going to have fish that are traveling through. So you're going to get a run of fish for a few days, and it'll be good, and then they'll disappear, and you'll have to wait for another body of fish to come through. And it's exactly what happens at Exmouth. You see it there. They'll have fishing good, and if they have the current hitting the ledge, they'll hold there for a bit, and then once that, like, then you'll talk to them, and they're like, oh, they're catching them, like, 50 miles north. That batch of fish, if the current keeps pushing, will be down there in a few days. So, but look, man, I'm not a guru at that. I just know the handful of things that I know. Like, that's just what I would be thinking. If I was going out here, I'd be looking for that slow moving water in that fast water, because that's going to give me a chance of fishing an area where their bait potentially could hold. Otherwise, I think I'm just like, if I was going out and the current was ripping, all I'd do is pick a place and try to run across that current as much as I possibly could and try to intersect the fish coming down in that current or a body of fish. Because as I say, if you fish that current, you're going to get blasted. It's very hard to stay on a spot in a bunch of current, because you're just going to get naturally pushed down, especially in a trailer boat. Plus then you add wind on here, makes it extremely difficult, So
So if the wind and the current are going different directions,
Oh,
that's the current that you...
current's my main thing
That's the main bit.
for me, yeah. But
you can have a following wind.
yeah, but it's going to be a shit sea, mate. It'll be rough as balls. You're probably not going to be able to fish. Like you get 3 or 4 knots of current with like 10 or 15 knots on it and a meter swell. It's going to be pretty shitty. Yeah. Well, the thing is, man, like Cape Verde is exactly that. It's not like it's uncomfortable. Exmouth, the same sort of conditions, man. It's uncomfortable fishing, Makes it difficult. So if you guys can consistently fish well in those conditions, it's very good. You're doing really well, because it's hard, Like a lot of the conditions here are against you to fish well, So, yeah.
When you're talking about angling and the drag pressure, what are you doing to get the fish that's sitting at 50 to 100 metres and it's been at that depth for, let's say, half an hour?
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
When these hooks have come up, we've seen that it's definitely bill wrapped.
Okay.
It's kinked, wrapped.
Yeah, so what I would do in that situation, right? I would have 2 choices. So I always talk about keeping that lure behind the fish, right? The one that's not hooked. But there comes a time, mate, and if you've had that fish and you've tried all your tricks, I'm still trying to keep behind the fish and do this. Like, I'm massive about staying behind the fish. But this is where it comes back to watching what that fish did on the bite. So, okay, so let's talk about the 2 scenarios. You've got one that you think is hooked and you've got one that you think is not hooked, right? Okay, I'm always going to fight the fish. Even if I know it's hooked, I'm going to try to fight it like it's not hooked, because it's going to let me catch it way faster, because I'm going to keep it up on the surface. But we're going to get into a situation like that, what you just mentioned. In that situation, if I don't think the fish is hooked and it's been half an hour like that, I'm like, okay, fishing's good or fishing's shit, right? I'm going to go, okay, fishing's good. I'm going to do a few turns on this fish, try to change the angle and do something different. And I'm going to talk about what I'll do in a sec. But I'm going to try to change the angle on this fish and do some other things. But it gives me the risk of pulling that fish off, pulling that fish off the bill. So I'm going to make a decision. Well, fishing's really good. I'm going to do the next step. But if fishing's not good, and I'm only going to have 1 or 2 chances today, I'm going to sit it out. And I'm going to be patient. And it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult. I'm just going to do everything I possibly can to not get in front of that fish, and I'm going to sit it out, and I'm going to wait for that fish. I'm hoping it's going to fuck up, and that's when I'm going to catch it. But if I think it's hooked, and if you ever get one that all of those things that I spoke about before, you think it's hooked, and you've done that massive change of drag, and it doesn't do anything, there's 2 things you're going to do, or 2 things that I would do. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try, this is a really effective technique, and it's going to be a really effective technique for a tuna as well. If you get a big tuna on it, it's straight up and down digging on you. I'm going to get straight up and down on top of the fish, right? I'm going to have the boat here, and I'm going to have the angler out the side, right? Regardless of whether it's a launch or a trailer boat. I'm going to have the angler pointing out the side, a lot of drag on the fish, straight up and down. And I'm going to do some really tight turns on this fish, like really tight. And what that does is I feel it just rubs the leader across the fish, like across its eye, across its body, and just messes it up, and sort of, like, since you've got drag on it, maybe rolls it. And what will quite often happen is the fish will just start to come up to another level, and you'll get back on top of it, and you repeat the process. So what I found, though, that's an exceptional trick if you ever get a big tuna on, because the tuna sits there and it just does a circle. So all you do is you get on top of it, match the circle, and you just corkscrew it up like that. Tuna will come up every time. So that's the first trick I try. I try those few turns on a marlin. If that doesn't work, I play the fish like it's dead. And what I mean by that is I will just lock the drag up. I will, if I potentially can, work out where the current is, and I will drive the fish down current, right? And the reason I drive it down current is because it gets the fish moving, keeps the fish moving, and that's the hardest part, is to keep the fish moving, right? So they're sitting down there like that, and I was always taught to get the fish into the current because it's going to lift it up, but you've still got to get the fish moving into the current to do that, and if it's a big one, it's very difficult. So if you get it moving with the current, you've got it moving, and with a lot of drag, so what I'll do in that situation, I'll have a black felt tip pen or a marker. I'll put a marker on the line when I start. I'll slowly idle the boat off with as much drag as I possibly can until I start losing too much line quickly. As soon as I lose that line quickly, I start going backwards, and I get the angler to start pulling in that slack line as much as they possibly can until they get back up on top of it again. And I will repeat that process, and quite often that'll be a really successful way to bring up a big fish that's still alive too. So that's what I would do. You're really in a rock and a hard place. You've got to make a decision whether you're going to wait for the fish to make a mistake, or you're going to try some couple of maneuvers. But those 2 maneuvers I just said there are very, very effective, extremely effective. And especially that last one, if the fish is dead, that's the only way you'll get it up. But it works really well on a live fish. So it was interesting. Last season, we had amazing fish in the Azores. I think I caught like 40-something over 600 pound last year. There's a lot of big fish. And a lot of them had to end up fighting like it was dead. And I was like, man, this thing's got to be like wrapped up or anything. Comes up, it's pinned perfectly in the corner of the mouth. And I would have said every time that fish was foul hooked. Just hard ones, you know. you get hard fish. That's the one you want, because it's a challenge, you know. So
I'm setting up a boat, just put the outriggers on, and then go to put the rods in the rod holders,
Yep.
and they're all fucked. Like, they're not where they should be. I just want to know what angle you'd be running your rod holders at, and what positions.
Okay.
On bent butts.
Bent butts?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, the first thing I'm trying to achieve is that I can reach every rod tip.
Yeah.
That's a massive thing, right? The second thing I'm trying to achieve is that they all clear when they would, like, if you got a fish. So traditionally, I would have, say, like starting at the, if we started at the, like you got your outriggers and then we go back to your next set of rod holders towards the transom, right? I'd have a set of set of 0 degree, straight up and down, pointing straight down your transom, right? So that would naturally be your long rigger lures, right? So they're pointing straight down up to your rigger and very high rod tip. So then I'd put in a set of 15 or set of 30 degree riggers on holders on a slight kick out. So the reason I do that is so when the rigger went, that line runs inside your corner lure. So that's how I'd have it set up. But the biggest thing is that you can reach your rod tip.
Yeah. I think at the moment they're about 30 degrees at where the riggers are, and
Yeah.
0 degrees at the transom.
Yeah, it's the polar opposite to what you should have, yeah. Yeah, just that's a massive thing. Like, I'm a real stickler for that because, as I said, this fishing's a head thing. I don't like looking at what I don't like looking at, if you understand what I mean. Like, if I go fishing and I'm looking at something that's pissing me off, I'm going to not fish properly. So I need to have it how I like it, otherwise I'm not going to fish properly. So what you want to do, like I'm a massive person with boat setup. Boat setup to me is a huge part of it because I can control all that. I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to fishing. I'm actually not that bad in life, but when it comes to the marlin fishing, I want to control all the factors that I can control. There's one factor that we can't control, and that's the marlin. But we can control a lot of the other things. So I'm like, well, why wouldn't I do that, you know? So, and the other thing is too, with the setup, it's like building a house. If you have a good foundation, everything flows from there. If you have a poor foundation, you're at the end having to put the spouting on crooked or something to make the house work, you know, like just little like things, silly things like that. So, yeah, that what you're going to go through now can change your fishing. And then the whole mindset of it, okay, I got my boat set up right. Okay, well, I'm going to start approaching my planning on my day like that. And then it just goes on and on and on. And I never thought that setting your boat up and doing that would change your fishing so much. But I've watched so many people now change their boat setup and their fishing mindset has changed and they catch a lot more fish. So, yeah.
In one of your podcasts, you were saying that you got really seasick, but you manage it.
Oh, I get seasick as anything, man.
What
Yeah.
do you do to manage that?
Throw up. Yeah, I suffer from seasickness really badly, man. But I try to look after myself, mate. Like, I always have like plain biscuits or crackers and stuff like that, and I just smash them, mate. And I always found that when I'm hungry, I get sick real bad. And it's going to sound probably not the best advice, but I like having a beer, not lots, just maybe one. That settles me down. But like the biggest thing is don't fight it from what I find. Like, I do not fight it at all. I'm like, if I'm going to be sick, I'm going to be sick, and then just get on with it. But the thing is, now, like, that I do the captaining, I don't get seasick anywhere near as much as what I used to. But it's, yeah, it's something I've always battled. It's probably held me back from doing quite a few things that I wish I could have done. Yeah.
Just lots of eating.
Eating, man, like, because the thing is, like, for me, like, if I get hungry, I feel sick anyway. And once you start to feel sick, you don't want to eat. So it's always like, I always try to stay, like, I won't go fishing without eating something in the morning, you know, like, I always have something to eat. And I don't really have a black coffee or anything, like, because that messes me up bad, you know. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, I just try to listen to what... But the biggest thing I found is not fight it, eh? And the other thing I found that works really well is not getting too hot. Like if I drink a lot of water and I suck on ice a lot. Ice helps because it cools your head down, and like it seems to work a bit for me. But yeah, man, I don't know. But I tried every seasick tablet under the sun, and they either work really well and make you feel shit, or they just don't work, you know. But I mean, I have people on the boat all the time, and they have the bracelets on, they have the patches, and they'll seem to. I don't know if it's a head thing or what, man. You know, I don't know. Yeah.
I'll ask the hot topic that probably everyone wants to. What's your opinion on colours?
What do you like looking at?
I thought you might say that.
No, okay, so let me be a bit more. There's definitely colours that are more, that work in certain areas better. So like I always listen to what's been popular in certain areas. But I mean, if I had to break it down, just your general, like anything that's a bait fish colour, anything that, then you have like one that's a real silhouette, so something that's black up against a sky, you know, looking up, squiddy looking thing, mackerel, so, and then I mean, what always works, the green one, you know, like that always works pretty good. So, but like honestly, I would go fishing with any colour as long as the action was good. And I'd go fishing with any colour that I liked, because I got to watch it all day. No, this is the, I know we all laugh and that, but what I'm trying to get at, the whole thing I'm talking about tonight is this thing here. Yeah, the thing is you're going to choose a lure. Why do you choose a lure off the wall? Because one, you've either heard your mate catch fish on it, or you've seen people catch fish on it, or you like the look of it. So that's why you're going to put it out behind your boat. I feel real confident about this lure. It's going to catch me a fish. Bang, catches you a fish. So as far as that goes, I got two ways of looking at it. I will use tried and true for an area, because in certain areas, different colours definitely do work. There's no doubt about it, man. But I also, on the other hand, I'm going to fish something that I like the look of. And I have my personal favourites for sure, you know. Like, I know I'm going to go and fish on Eddie's boat up in Exmouth there, and I know an orange, a black and orange one and a black and green one is going to be a killer colour, you know. So, yeah.
You said like trust your gut and like have instincts and stuff, but you fished everywhere like around the world.
Yep.
Are there any like commonalities
Yep.
that you've identified, like
Yep.
where you put the lure in the water and then you see a signal and you go, all right, the fish are going to
Yep.
start biting?
Not necessarily biting, but okay. So I always talk about this as process. And if we had to break it down, marlin eat bait. So if I was going somewhere new, I would be, if I got to a place and there was bait there, and there's a little bit of structure, or there was just had signs of bait, I would give that a real good fish, because I feel that there's going to be a marlin on the bait, because they eat it. And that has served me very well all around the world. I really struggled this year in the Azores because I did not have a sounder on my boat. It broke, and the owner wouldn't buy a new one. And he says, you catch plenty of fish anyway. And I'm like honestly, it was just, I really struggled, because not that I necessarily needed the sounder to catch fish, but what it allowed me to do is I'd turn up on it's exactly what you're talking about. I turn up in a spot and I'm the only boat there. I don't know whether I should stay here or not, because I can't see if there's any food on this ledge. And I don't feel there was any point of fishing that ledge if I didn't know if there was no food on it. Or else I'd get on the bank with the other boats, and I didn't know which end of the bank to fish because I didn't have a sounder, and I had to listen to somebody to tell me where the bait was. But that doesn't, it doesn't give you that. So to me, that bait, and then to know when you say they're going to bite, the only thing I could say is I'm watching on my sounder and I'm just watching that bait get higher and higher. And if I can see a marlin on it, I've got a feeling I'm probably going to get a bite here. Like with the sounder, the sounder's so good now. Kurt's the genius behind how to use one. I'm not a techo guy, but he gave me some coordinates of how to set my sounder up. And literally now marking a marlin on my sounder is as good for me as raising a marlin because I know they're there. I'm going to stay there. Might not have raised that one, but I'm going to stay there. I might raise another one, you know? So, yeah, that's how I look at it. But as I say, man, I only know what I know. You know, it doesn't mean it's right. But going into places where I don't know, I will always fish like that. Oh, yeah.
How patient are you with that? Like, you've seen baits.
I'm patient. I'll out-patient you, mate. Not in life. I was like, why can't I do this in my life? But I know in marlin fishing, I'm so confident in myself because I've done it for so long. And you know what? Some days I'm not going to catch one, and I'm going to feel, yeah, sweet as. Well, I didn't catch one, but I felt like I was in the best place for that day that I could to catch one. The amount of times that I've been there, we've got to go home, last pass, bang. You're like, shit, there was one here. It's weird. But yeah, I'm super patient, man. But I'm not patient in life. I want everything now. But marlin fishing, I am just the mind. This thing.
Bonze,
Yeah.
if you sound a fish, how much time will you give that area before you move on?
Well, I do a few passes, and if I don't see what I want to see, and if I don't, but then there's local knowledge comes into it, right? Do a few passes on that thing. Oh, it doesn't look that good here, but I'm like, fuck, I've caught a lot of fish here, man. Then I'll stay for a bit longer. Quite often, oh, there's bait there. You know, depends where it is, how much time I give it. If I'm at a place I really like and I've caught a lot of fish there, I'll probably give it more time, you know. But if I rock up in the morning and I pull the throttles back and I'm marking bait straight away, I'm like, oh, like this is probably going to be a pretty good day.
Can you recommend trailer boat for lure spread that it's going to cross over with X-Mouth pretty well as well?
Yeah. Like I'd have two really basic lures on the rigger. I'd have some sort of bullet, I'd make a lure called a DLB. I'd have a BTK out there, really simple lures to pull any weather, catch anything, sails, tunas, like blue marlins, all of that kind of stuff on your riggers. And then I'd go for a little bit more size and short. I'd definitely have a violator in there because that's still a good lure with a hook in it. And I'd probably I'd have two different ones here. It's a hard choice for me. Try to have a ballistic in there on my long corner. I caught a lot of big fish on that, but that's only calmer weather. And rougher weather, I'd have something like an Islander or Hercules in there, cup face to hang in there. But that would be it's hard for me to pick four, but that would be a pick six. So, that would be my spread, you know, something like that. But ultimately, the biggest thing when I'm picking the lure, especially when it's rough, all I want the lure to do is stay in the water because the marlin are really good at missing a lure that's jumping. They like eating them, but they're not that good at hooking themselves on that lure. You want a lure that stays in the water that will help because they are not good at eating anything out of the water. So yeah, that would be my pick, man. And yeah, so. All right.
Teaser-wise, if you're starting out and don't have the budget to invest too much, would you look to spend the money on a dredge first, or just like a simple, like I see your squids there, like a strip?
if I was going to spend the money on anything before I did that, I'd spend my money on my outriggers. That would be the first thing I'd spend the money on. If you'd already done that, I would be putting a chain in my rigger, and you can do that with a hand line and just have a breakaway, so a pulley, hand line pulley up into your rigger with a, say, 50-pound breakaway off your rigger. So if it does actually get eaten, it snaps it off the rigger, doesn't snap your rigger out. But you must have the teaser in the rigger. The presentation is massive again. Running it off your cleat is not going to be, you'll see, I would say 10% of the fish that you would see if you put the teaser in the rigger. The amount of fish that you'll see will increase by tenfold, I would say, putting it in the rigger. That would be my first thing on a budget to keep it really simple. And then I would add in a dredge if I could afford it afterwards. But that would be, if I was on a budget, that's what I'd do.
And running the dredges on the flat, is that okay? 'Cause
No.
I'm-
Don't even waste
I
your
haven't
time.
I haven't got the riggers on the, like, it's not.
Don't even waste your time.
So, no.
It's going to be more pain. So everything's a pro and a con, right? A dredge is a really good thing. But a dredge must be set up properly, or else it's going to be the biggest nightmare you can ever imagine. So if, just for example, if you run a dredge off your transom cleat, right, where are you going to put it when you hook it up? In the bottom of your boat, in a tangled mess, and then it's going to take you 20 minutes to chuck your dredge back out again? You're going to put it in your wheels when you forget about it? Oh shit, where's the dredge? Oh shit, it's in the outboard. Good for me, I'll sell you another dredge. But not good for you. So yeah, dredge to me, unless it's set up with a boom and, like, worst case, a rope to pull your dredge, but the boom will pull it up out of the water and it'll sit there, hang, and what it'll allow you to do is drop the dredge back in the water and get fishing again really quickly. It'll keep it out of the cockpit. It'll allow you to turn, keep it away from the engine. Like, yeah, a dredge, unless it's set up properly, is more of a pain in the ass than and I really like a dredge. Like, I will pull a dredge a lot. Like, I really like it. So yeah, I would be doing my riggers first, a teaser chain, and then a dredge. Yeah. And as I say, everything comes down, as you said, comes down to money. This is not a cheap game, unfortunately.
Would you say the further you can get the teaser out, the more fish you see on it?
Not necessarily, but I do like it out. So I do like it up in the rigger nice and high, but it's still inside my corner lure, you know. So like I run, so like my spread, I'd have my teasers on wave 1 to 2, depending on the boat size, maybe 2 to 3, and then I'm starting my lures closest normally, very close on, would be 3 would be really close for me. But I've got my teasers in where I traditionally have a really short lure. And the thing is, it's not like they don't get eaten in short, like the teaser gets eaten and hammered. But I just like that lure in the really clean water, you know? So, and the thing is, especially about fishing trailer boats as opposed to launches, on a trailer boat, we have very small wake compared to your launch. So say your launch is wave 3, that would be the same as wave 5 on a trailer boat, that distance, you know? So you can exaggerate everything with a trailer boat. You can run things a lot further back, but that's why I like to have the riggers, because I'm running stuff further back. I now want to pull it all up high so it runs properly. You see? So get a lot of guys will go bring a boat to me and I'll change it round for them. And you'll talk to them and like, oh, where's your hot spot? Oh, rigger is a hot spot. I get a lot of bites on my rigger. Does it get any bites in close? Not very many. Put all 4 lures in the riggers, all of a sudden, he hasn't got any better at fishing, but he's starting to see more fish on his corners. So he was obviously running over fish before, but his presentation was poor. So, yeah.
Do you change the speed of the boat, like with different conditions, or you were just set like?
Drive my boat to the condition.
So like.
I have my revs, man.
Yeah.
Like I say, say whatever I am, I'm like 1200 RPM. I'm going to drive my boat to the conditions. That's why I don't go down sea, don't go up sea, as little as possible. I'm going to go across sea. I'm going to try to drive the boat to get the consistent speed out of it. But I very rarely have to adjust my, unless I'm doing like, I'm going down sea and I'm really getting like pushed, I very rarely change my RPM. So, but that's me. This is this thing. Again, I know my boat gets bid at whatever RPM. Probably gets bid at heaps of RPMs. But the one thing I will say about blue marlins, that's one thing I didn't get onto, is speed. I really like it above 8 knots. And so the boat I ran at KV was a 33 Bertram. I think the owner's best season was like, I don't know, like 70 odd marlin. The first season I caught over double his amount of marlin he caught, and the only thing I changed was I went faster. And you can't really go too fast because I caught them at 16 knots. Like running, I just run a lure out the back, and yeah, I've caught them like going fast. So I like to have a little bit of pace on when I'm fishing for blue marlin, especially like that, over 8 knots, if I can. Hard to do in a trailer boat sometimes if you don't. Yeah, it's right. Yeah, exactly. It's hard to do. Yeah. So I'm trying. If I can, I'm up around that 8 knots in a trailer boat. If I can only do what I can do. If I'm only doing 7 knots, that's all I'm doing. You know. I just gotta. That's what I'm doing. Just gotta have a spread that I like the look of at that pace. But I definitely notice going faster, I see more blue marlin. So, right. Cool. Any more questions? All right.
Yeah, outriggers.
Mm-hmm.
You just sort of said you were running 4 lures.
Yeah.
All in the outriggers.
Yeah.
And a teaser in the outriggers.
Yeah.
So trailer boat, I'm guessing most people who have trailer boats that they're taking to Exmouth and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you trying to get the longest outriggers you can to get it out as wide as you can, or?
Now this is a double. This is sort of yes and no. So there's a bit of like you've got to remember your trailer boats. You've got to carry these things, right? So, okay, so say I've got a 6 meter boat. I'd like to pick for the 6 meter boat, like say 5.5 meter pole, maybe a 6 meter pole at the most. I'm going to all of a sudden have 3 halyards on it because I'm going to run 4 lures in the riggers plus my teaser chains in the riggers. So I've got a lot of halyards on those, right? So I don't use a tag line because of that, because putting a tag line on would be even more halyards. I like a tag line. I've got no preference whether you run a tag line or you don't run a tag line. If I was running a tag line though, I'd want an even longer pole because with the tag line, it's going to suck your spread in, right? And the other thing, I wouldn't run a tag line at an Exmouth personally because it's so windy that in the turn, I'd get sick of trying to clear the loose line over the rod tips all the time. It would drive me insane. So I would fish like that, but I would try to fish as, like to answer your question, the longest pole I possibly could manage with the advantages of being able to, travel with it. Yeah. So
when you say tag line, you just run them through the roller trollers?
No, I hate a roller troller, personally.
I'll sim that, you know what I mean?
Sorry?
Or I'll sim like what you just put them in the clip then instead of...
No, so I run a Dacron loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I run a Dacron loop is because I control the amount of drag that comes out of the clip.
Yeah.
So it's just another thing that I can control for consistency. I don't have a problem with well, I do have a problem with the roller troller. The reason I don't like a roller troller is because if it's not set up correctly, it can break your line. So if you have somebody that you're fishing with that doesn't put the clip in the right way and it goes twists and it puts it in the right way, it'll snap your line every time you get a bite. So when you rig a roller troller, make sure you put a swivel in it connected, so then it can lay any which way and it will always open. If you don't, how they come with the metal piece and a ring, if somebody puts the line in backwards, it'll snap your line every time. So, and the other thing I don't like, it has roller troll has advantage, you can tease a fish and all that kind of stuff, right? But I just don't like looking at the rod tips like bending hard out all day, or the line pointing up, and like once again, this thing.
So you're not using elastic bands?
Definitely not.
So what's this Dacron loop?
So Dacron loop, okay. So Dacron loop, it's a piece of braid or Dacron that is on your main line, right? And it works with a theory of like it grips on your line and holds it in place. So like a tow line, like a tow rope. You know how it grips down on itself? It's the same as a splice, basically. You feed your mono up and it grips. Well, you put a piece of that actually on your line, and it's got a loop in it, right? And you whip a little piece of floss at the end of it so it doesn't slip. But you can still adjust it, right? So that allows me to put it in a clip that I can tension and put a drag scale on. So I know that every time it comes out of that clip, it's whatever, 6 kilos or 5 kilos, whatever it is I've set the clip at, I know that that's a variable that I can control. Right? The other thing is it's really quick. Now, using a rubber band is very good. It's very safe, right, if it's put on correctly. The only thing is that, say that rubber band's been in all day, and you get a bite or it just breaks. You don't know whether you've had a bite. You don't know whether you've had a break. It's not breaking at a consistent number, and I'm all about consistency. So for me, I don't like the rubber band just because it's not consistent. And as I said, once again, I'm trying to control all the things that I can control and I take a very consistent approach to all of the things, because I feel if I don't take a consistent approach, I'll never get an idea of, if I make a little change, whether that actually works, because I don't have a baseline to go from. So I don't make wild changes. Like, I just try small things and see if that makes a difference.
What's the drag on the fish if you're doing Marlin fishing?
So everything I do is like 6 kilos, 6 or 7 kilos, like 15 pounds. And that's where my reel's set too, on the bite. And I don't touch it unless I think it's not hooked, and I'll back it off. I don't go up. So just to put it in perspective, who here has put a broomstick in the water and tried to swing it?
Not recently.
Anyway, it's bloody hard, eh? So you just think about how fast that how much power is in a marlin. You know, when they swing their bill and you're like, phew, phew, like there's a lot of power there. So that fish, I feel, when it comes in and eats, probably hooked itself straight away. So I don't think I need lots of drag to hook it. I feel that that's quite a bit of drag, 6 kilos or 7 kilos, just like boom. And if not, I'm not ripping that hook off the fish, which I was doing before. I used to fish like 15 kilos on the bite, 20 kilos on the bite. Like just like, holy shit, you know?
So you're now setting up 6 kilos at the strike point?
No. Still got normal strike. But what I'm doing is I'm just keeping it like enough there that I think it's going to set the hook, but also to keep it on the bill. And I'm trying to keep it as light as possible and stay connected to it So how I learnt this, mate, I feel, is I had to try to take my crew out of it, and I had to take my anglers out of it. So I'm fishing in a way where I'm trying to eliminate the possible points of disaster, that we don't have to worry about having people that don't know what they're doing touch the drag. So that sort of 5 to 7 kilo sort of range seems to be a reasonable medium, that if you get a big fish on, and it rips a whole heap of line, I don't have to worry about the drag either. Get a big fish on, then it's around the bill, I don't really have to worry about the drag either. So it's sort of a point that I feel is pretty, you know. And then if I can gain line at that, even better, because that leaves me up my sleeve like so much drag change, and to me the drag change is the absolute secret. And I can fish like that on 30 pound, 5 kilos. I can fish like that on 50 pound, 5 kilos. I can fish that on 130 pound. Might have to have a little bit more on 130 pound because I got line drag. Maybe a little bit bigger lure, so I might have to have like 7 kilos on. But yeah, it's just a sort of safe spot, I feel. And it leaves me that massive change of drag up my sleeve. And that to me is the absolute, like I get a big fish on 130 pound, I'm like, I'm gonna mess you up, mate. Because I got such a big drag change. I've literally at the top end, I've got like 30 kilos of drag I can put on this fish. From 5 or 7. Mate, you think about it. So you're walking, and I see a lot of this in the cell we used to fish. We just go up a couple of clicks, go up a couple of clicks more, a couple of clicks more, a couple of clicks, does nothing. So you think about it, say you're walking, and you slowly get another couple of kilos on, you get another couple of kilos on, you get another couple of kilos. Yeah, by the end of it, you're carrying lots of weight, you're like, geez, it's quite heavy, but you've gone a long way. If somebody dumps a whole heap of weight on you straight away, you're like, oh, shit, you know? I think that's the same as how I think it works, you know? But look, as I said, all of the stuff I talk about is just my theories. Doesn't mean it's right. I've never spoken to a marlin. Like, you know, I don't know. So I'm just talking out what I've seen, you know? You guys have seen things that I haven't seen. So I'm going to learn from you too, you know? But yeah. Anyway, like, is there any more questions? Because otherwise hey, like, thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate your time. But yeah, I just also want to thank, like, without guys like you, I wouldn't have my job. So yeah, so thank you so much for like supporting me, and I hope that the more you support me, the better I can make my products to make them better for you. So yeah, I really appreciate that. That's a really big thing for me. So thank you very much, guys, and I really wish you best of luck with your marlin fishing. And if I can ever do anything to help, please just reach out. And I want to say thanks to these boys as well for letting me talk, and for their support to let me do something I absolutely love. And yeah, I wish you boys all the best, because you've got a beautiful store here, mate. It's a credit to you. So cheers, guys.